Hello everyone, so welcome to episode 44 of Teh Tarik with Walid, and today we will have a civil society legend, a former nominated member of parliament, Ms. Braema Mathi, and she will be sharing with us her thoughts on the NMP scheme, on civil society in general, perhaps even if we have time on race in Singapore, on the GRCs, because she has done some work on this as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to have her. She had a chapter in this book which I previously discussed with former NMP Antia Ong, who is the editor of this book. She has a chapter in it, and in this she argues, Braema did, she argues that the NMP scheme has basically outrun its course and it's no longer relevant. So, and that is pretty provocative. Let's see how she substantiates her arguments later on. Oh, okay, that was easy. Yes.
Sorry. Did I come in at the wrong time?
No,
Sorry.
it's at the perfect timing. So, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Had a very busy day, so now I'm like trying to get into this groove. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, how are your days like usually now?
Oh, right now I don't know why I've gotten myself into very busy weeks for the last 6 weeks. I don't know what's happening, but you commit and then you got to carry it through, right? Yeah.
Okay, so these are mostly civil society engagement.
Civil society and some contract work. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for agreeing to be here. I'm very honored. I mean, as I said just now, you're quite a legend. I think for yeah. I mean, for people who are involved in civil society, you would know that you're one of the most prominent activists. You know, most outspoken at times. And I am happy to have you here. So let's start off with your chapter, right? So you think the NMP scheme has outrun its course?
Thanks, Walid, for the Teh Tarik. And let's see where we go with this. Yes,
Yes.
I argued in that chapter that yes, it has outrun its course, but I also put in and also I placed it within an ecosystem in terms of parliamentary processes and parliamentary structures. So one of it is I talked about the NCMP scheme, that right now it is the best loser in a GE that gets a position there. Sorry, I forget the numbers now.
12.
6 to 9.
Minus X, yeah.
That's
12
right.
minus X, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So that began, I found the dates very interesting. It began in 1984. I make an argument that because they work quite hard, whatever year you look at the NCMPs, they do work quite hard, and they are given small allowance like NMPs. So we might as well just cut through that whole process and let them be a full non-elected MP rather than carry on with an NCMP in quite a marginalized approach. The other thing that I also raised, I'll just go through very quickly, gallop through it. I talked about how in 1987, the government started the Government Parliamentary Committee, almost like a shadow cabinet, which is in its own way good because we have a mammoth ruling party by numbers. Then in 1998, the Group Representative Constituencies began, GRC. Then in 1990 came the NMP scheme. So it's part of quite a number of structures that were going on within parliamentary structures to try and create some space for some level of opposition voices. So the NMP scheme came in. I think when the time it came in, it functioned very well because there was a lacuna in its own way for strong opposition voices. That doesn't mean, therefore, all the opposition voices came from the NMPs. That would be, this is not a zero-sum game. So there were some diverse voices that came from NMPs as well as NCMPs, as well as the GPC, Group parliamentary committee, because
The
some of them
government parliamentary committee.
some of them were headed by quite strong elected MPs who did quite a lot of groundwork, and then they pushed in quite a number of interesting issues. But over time, over the decades, NMP scheme is 32 years old now. Over the decades, especially if we look at the NMP book, wonderful work done by Anthea and her team, Braema, but it is also quite clear that quite a number of the more recent batches of NMPs volunteered their views. Some of us in the older batches, I'm in the 9th and 10th, not enough of us have, but this is voluntary, so Anthea and her team have tried the best. So what I'm saying is we have to plot the progression of the NMP scheme over the years and its relevance. So coming back to the question that you have asked, I feel today, and that was the last part of my chapter, looking at the environment that we have, highly, and I think Mr. Tharman, what's his total title? Sorry, Senior Coordinating. Yeah, thank you. Tharman Shanmugaratnam gave a recent good speech that is on his website. He has mapped out what are some of the global tensions we are facing. But I just want to highlight certain bits of what we are facing. We are facing a huge onslaught of different voices on social media, different forms, instant, podcasts, Instagram that I'm just picking up through you, right? So I find that there is this thing that is coming, consuming us also, and we are being consumed by it. Therefore, I find that Parliament then has to become a stronger debater, a stronger setter of values, norms, etc. Therefore, who should be the persons within Parliament? It comes back to us citizens. We have to put in elected MPs. And to put in elected MPs, not to say that all the nominated MPs have done a bad job. These are two separate discussions I'm having. I feel under elections, the candidate has to really give a good portrayal of issues. More importantly, the political parties have to evolve, mature. They are maturing. They have to all evolve to a state where we get strong manifestos, even though sometimes information is not so easy when we look at data, such that we can make better decisions. Therefore, while I'm saying that the NMP scheme needs to be phased out, in the last part, I also make suggestions that by 2040, it should be over. I didn't say tomorrow. So by 2040 means at least maybe another 3 GEs or so. 20, I can't remember what I put it. Therefore, there will be at least a few more selection processes of NMP, but we make a determined time that it needs to be phased out so that opposition parties, I'm not saying one, opposition parties grow, offer all good alternatives. And this is also a problematic word because I feel we keep using it. What do we mean by good alternatives? We have to look at manifestos quite clearly. Opposition political parties need to come out very strongly early, not nearer election dates and then say, here's my manifesto, so that we have choices. But can this happen? I find one of our restrictions that we would face would be the GRC scheme. It would still be there. That would put a lot of pressure on both opposition parties as well as me as a voter. My one vote, where does it go? And how do we have an equal platform of candidates that are equally positioning themselves? So I know I can go on, so I stop.
No, that was good. There was a lot in there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I wanted to pick up on a couple of things. So one, you said the Parliament should be the institution that sets the norms and values.
Sets the norms and values in terms of being the arbiter quite strongly.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that. That's very good that you asked.
Right. Yeah. Because I was thinking, yes, that is true. I mean, I definitely agree about the arbiter because Parliament is supposed to reflect
Yeah.
societal values, right? More than setting. Of course, I mean it's not an either or.
Ah,
So yeah. Thank you for that. The other is we'll get to the GRC, right? So one of the, I think Arun mentioned, one of the criticisms of the NMPs is, and I think sometimes we are, people like me, we are
yeah.
guilty of romanticizing the NMP scheme, because I am quite a fan of an NMP scheme. And I always say, oh, look at people like Anthea and
Yeah.
Braema and Walter, and but you guys are in the minority. The majority, the majority of NFPs people don't even know them. Sometimes they coast along, and sometimes they, because I mean you were at the event as well, right? I think ESM Go made. I don't know whether he was being cheeky, but he said he found that NMPs rarely ever agree with the government. He mentioned that, yeah.
But he also made a point that they do not also disagree enough from his point of view with the opposition parties. I thought that was quite interesting that he
Right,
mentioned.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So I've never felt that NMPs in general
yeah.
always disagree with the government. I mean, and definitely voting wise also, there's just no data to back that up, right? So would you say that the NMP scheme then legitimizes the, or it gives less of an incentive for citizens to vote for the opposition?
The phrase that I used in the chapter, inconvenient convenience and convenient inconvenience, that is the problematic structuring of the NMP scheme. It can become an easy way for us to believe that it is great for a parliamentary system. And
Right,
therefore, we know it tickles us, it nudges us, it pushes us a bit, but it's all right. It's an inconvenient, but we're getting something better out of it. Undeniably, we cannot deny that part too. But it is also too convenient if it we we can become conveniently, what is the right word, I don't want to use seduced by it. We can also be conveniently enthralled by the whole approach that it works, therefore it
right,
needs to go on. That is why I pitched it at 2040. I
right.
pitched it at that time because I said the current teenagers in Singapore today, and I calculated from 13 years old to 19 years old, by the time 2040 comes, they are in the decade of their 30s. What are we going to give them? And why is that important for us to look at it? Because look at the global structuring, internal conflicts, economic issues, trade agreements, supply chains, essentials. Is everyone getting their essentials? And I just watched BBC on Liz Truss trying, British Prime Minister Liz Truss, trying to make an argument for this rapid budget adjustment that they have made and justifying that it is good. I'm not an economist, but I'm wondering it is going to be quite tragic if it doesn't work. I think these are all the issues that we are facing, and I urge everyone to read Senior Minister Starman's speech, because he has picked out all the nuggets of what. So if this is what we are facing, how are we going to prepare our next generation? So going back to your earlier question, the NMP scheme sooner or later has to go. And I
Right.
suggested by the end of the chapter that we also need an independent task force to look at our structure of parliament. Independent is a key operational word. It has to be, so that what is going to take us into the future, if we care enough about Singapore sustainability, our citizens, we have to, I think, engage on these issues more deeply and bitingly. I think that's quite important.
Who are independent folks in Singapore? Because it seems like it's so difficult to, if in a country where the state penetrates almost every institution,
Yeah.
and even civil society, right? I mean, a lot of civil society organizations even initially were maybe critical of the government, but over time became more cooperative with the government as well. So, is there truly an independent? I mean, there are some, but probably these are people who never get positions on committees anyway, right? So who are independent folks in your opinion, right? Yeah, I mean, if I were to
Yeah.
give you the liberty, right? So you can choose who would you want on this committee, right? Who
Oh,
would
good.
you choose? Yeah, yeah.
I
Other than
that's
yourself.
a good question. I think it will sound scaringly like a whole plethora of NMP. Sorry, no, I don't mean that, because of the group think that when after a period of time by ninth when a ninth member of I was in the ninth parliament, it was more loose how NMPs were there. By the 10th, it was group representation, which also I think one of the NMPs has written about this, that group representation can mean that you then go into your cocoon to just represent
Right.
your group
So
thing,
you mean
which is
from
not
the
good.
sector, right? Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
now to go back to your question about independent, we need some of that group thinkers to share views, but we also need our lay person, our so-called pedestrian. We also need our lower end of the socio-economic class. I think we need both the upper level of our society, the middle band, as well as the lower. We need to engage our young. We need to engage our persons growing older. So we need to develop a set of questions that we take on and robust them up, that we take it. So it means it is a process, but we have to decide that we really want to do this. What is the best parliamentary system that will take us into our future? So I also talked about the bicameral and the unicameral
Right,
approach.
indeed.
And I
Yeah.
mentioned that Sweden, Netherlands, they are unicameral, and we do look up to them as having quite a good approach to democracy, to economic well-being, people well-being. I think there are systems out there that we have to study. Academics who are in political science and watching parliamentary systems can contribute to that knowledge base. It is not, let's get a task force and let's go to bed and talk and dream about it and come out and give our answers. I think it's going to be a process. And one last part to the question, I'm also conscious of time because I run the risk of
It's
talking
okay.
too
No,
much.
carry on.
Yeah. So I feel that the whole process of consultation is very, I think this is one of, I read somewhere in some article, a lovely word that I took down, patterned approach, and I cannot find it. Patterned approach. We have to break out of patterned approaches to how we do our consultations. So when we
Right.
invite CSOs, for example, or we invite anybody from whatever strata to get their feedback on what they see our parliamentary system to be like, working from now to envisage it for 2040s, I do think who are the people we bring to the table? It cannot always be a choice by the government.
Right.
And even if you are what I put in inverted commas, troublesome, I think that person has to come in. And
Right.
the views
Such as who?
that I, I mean, there are a few names, but once you name people, you don't name others, then they will think, hey, you didn't see me. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to
Fair.
do that.
Yeah.
But I think some of I
Our
hate that
friends.
word, I hate that word troublemakers, because I think it is so laden with judgment. But anyway, and there is this cocoon of people whom are seen to be troublemakers.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think how we do that consultation with them, and should we use that word consultation? Should it be just the word open-ended, share, read up, we share with you knowledge that of systems. Now let's dream together, and then from the dream, let's cut down to the kernel what can work for us and how do we develop our country going forward. I think all that is important, and run the risk of people saying that, oh, Braema is always an idealist, she fantasizes about this. I think we have also talked a lot in Singapore about we have to become problems, identify the problem and work towards finding a solution. I feel that carrying on in this convenient inconvenience of the NMP scheme is not going to help us grow more strongly in our parliamentary system. We need to give space for opposition political parties to get their act together. I'm tired of opposition political parties having internal problems and then people resigning and all sorts of stuff. I think get the act together, consolidate and move more forward. I think that's important. And at the same time, engage. Communications is so important. How you engage with the citizens. Not lastly, but the other area, citizens. I think citizens, we need to know and become more empowered on what we want for our own future, not for my future, for these teenagers that I ended off. My conclusion was these teenagers who will be in their range of 30s in 2040, and we have to prepare the world for them. Yeah.
Right.
So I hope I have sort of answered your
Yes,
who are
definitely.
people. Yes.
Definitely. So,
Yeah.
thank you for that. That was really comprehensive. And I also, I mean, I want to
Yeah.
express my support for what you just said as well. I do think that sometimes in the dialogues, right, no matter how well intentioned, uh, the selection determines the outcome already. In terms of who you call to the dialogue, then those are the answers that you're gonna get. You already sort of know the answers, right? And if you don't engage the so-called troublemakers, right, then you are, I think, one of the ways to actually make them feel belong and make them is by including them in the system, right? And stop. I guess we should stop treating people who disagree with us as enemies, right? Or as even the word troublemaker. I know Anthea. She likes being called troublemaker. She embraces the term, but I guess not everybody is willing and able to do that. So I think we definitely, or the government definitely needs to do more of that. Engaging people, but partly also, wouldn't you say that civil society organizations also are to blame when they are always, so it's sort of a conundrum for them, right? So on one hand, if you don't engage, you don't get a seat. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So this was what I got from someone. Hajar said that, and if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. So on one hand, you want to sit at the table. On the other hand, there's also something to be said about solidarity, right? Like, oh, okay, if so and so and so, if I'm not invited, then I don't want to be. But it's always a conundrum, and you are a veteran in this thing, right? How do you? I'm sure you've come across such situations in your activism before, right? And how did you navigate? And what would your advice be to civil society organizations or activists? Yeah.
Yes. I you so we could swap places here. Coming to mapping it, maybe because there will always be gaps in even in mapping it. I think we have to look at our early history. I will go back to the women's movement. The Singapore Council, I forgot the name of the current Singapore Council of Women's Organization.
Right. Yeah.
Before it had another name. Now, they were the ones who worked very hard against the polygamy. And they met the present ruling party, right? And they had lots of discussions with them. But it's interesting that one of our first woman parliamentarians was Madam Chan Choi Siong. She was on the ruling party, PAP's ticket, and she pushed quite hard in Parliament for monogamy women's charter. I'm citing that as an example of how people's sector, in this case primarily women, right, with a lot of women leaders in it, strong women leaders, working with the government, and then we have a parliamentarian who tabled and who managed to get polygamy at least It is still there, but you need to get permission and all that if you want. But at least it cut out at that time the system of having some of the men, especially those richer ones, having concubines, because when they pass on, the children and the other wives or other women are left hard for cash and for livelihood maintenance and everything. So that's one example. But over the years, the 1980s and the 1990s, we saw a mushrooming of, not mushrooming is too strong. We saw more CSOs that being aware, and I think Action for AIDS too was, I'm trying to remember the years now. So a few more came up. But of course, then we had the Marxist conspiracy, the Operation Spectrum, that made many people feel I better step back. But where are we today? And then, of course, along the way, we had Home, we had TWC2, we had a lot of work going on under the faith-based groups, whether it's the Buddhist group, yes, whether it is the Catholic group, and then we have, of course, later on Marwa. But I think today, where are we is what I'm quite fascinated by, and we cannot even start tabulating it. A lot of e-groups have come up, and they are not registering themselves by applying to the registry of societies, etc. They are functioning as an e-network of individuals. I think that is beautiful and wonderful. Yeah. And one of them that we all know, Transformative Justice Collective. The kind of research that they are pushing out, the kind of interviews that they are doing, the kind of advocacy and challenging the state on its approach to the death penalty, both conceptually and modus operandi. Why is it that one after another, I exaggerated a bit, but of course it was very fast, quite a number were hanged to death, right? I think that is, to me, fascinating. And when Yale NUS was fully functioning under the old schema, we had a lot of young students as they pursue their undergrad and all that, engaging with different CSOs and all the rest to develop discussion points and all the rest of it, which is all very good. But where is our weakness? Our weakness is still civil society and state dialogue. This is, as you have also described it earlier, it is a special pathway. Are you in that pathway or you're not in that pathway? My own personal experience, I have been in that pathway, and I've also not been in it, right? And here I would just like to cite one example, and I didn't ask this person for permission. I hope he doesn't mind. Prof. Tomiko, when we did the work as the Working Committee 2, before we registered and became Transient Workers Count 2. At that time, the migrant worker discussion was still a high resistance discussion, not only at state level. Sometimes at some point, I felt that the state was more open, but the people sector, right. Why are you advocating for domestic worker? So we have moved on, which is good. We have moved on. 2022, we are better. We are on Miss Party's side, that whatever trials she went through, it ought not have happened to her. We have moved quite a bit, people sector, the public. And I think COVID brought a lot of us out to say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that this was their dormitory. Oh, food supplies, whatever, I'm there. The physical nature of volunteering has gone up. But going back to the issue, so because I was also an NMP, this is where the usefulness is, which is what I also wrote in the chapter. I did many other things as an MP. I raised social work issues and all the rest of it, right? But on the issue of me being an NMP, I sought Prof. Tommy because he was very happy that this issue was coming up. But what he did was quite, to me, phenomenal. He said, you get the other actors, I will get the government representatives. He invited different ministries to the table. I brought in the domestic workers. I brought in me, meaning the Working Committee 2. We brought in embassy representatives. We brought in some nature of, we had informal groups that were representing domestic workers under the embassy. That round table discussion that we had was, I think, a page turner, because the civil servants or civil service officers round the table had never heard, in my view, workers, 3 domestic workers who spoke very well about what they are going through. The embassy representatives also shared data because they have a complaints mechanism that I think really woke up quite a number of people around the table. Now, this is an informal discourse, but in a way, Prof. Tomiko did his usual mediator role, and I found that quite a page turner. We need more of that.
I was just going to ask how many Tomikos we have in, you think, in the...
It's a good question that you have asked. All of us will grow very quickly to have that stature of Prof. Tomiko. He's 80-something, that's one. 2, he has built up his whole career through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, being at UN and being at other international political, as our international representative. But it doesn't mean that we only have to rely and give that kind of stature to Prof. Tomiko. There are other mediators. So it goes back to your earlier question. To what extent are we going to drop our defense mechanisms that are very strong and embrace? We got to unfold. We got to open up. And mistakes will happen. You give somebody some kind of, okay, you function like a Prof. Tomiko, whatever that means, and that person makes mistakes. It is okay. It is okay. Let's go back to our focus discussion. Did we get our main 3 points, 5 points? And so how can we develop it? I think that is where we have to be. I have picked up quite a lot of these possibilities when I started working in Marwa, more in the region, ASEAN level, because there are 10 member states and they all have different governmental systems. Some are not at all democratic and some are democratic, and yet civil society groups, academics, government representatives, there's a lot of navigation that is taking place. Sometimes it's an utter failure. Sometimes you move at least 2 steps. Today you move 2 steps forward, the next day you go back to 1. It's a regression again. But I think that kind of level of engagement, in my view, is important. It doesn't then mean that Singapore is not happening at all. That would be too disastrous. I think things happen, but it happens on a level of priority. So if we have now ratified the CRPD, Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, now we have to, Singapore is good when you ratify an international convention. Therefore, we got to develop our work plan, our action points, etc. We got to engage the community. Now, please come. Let's talk seriously because you are important. You are going to be the deliverer on the ground. But I think that cannot be the only pattern. There must be no patterns too. Bring the people, talk.
Right.
And I think I have found over the years, sometimes you see a wonderful window that I think can open up. Then after a while, the window gets, the opening gets narrower and narrower. And I have gone to some meetings with the state and I have said, oh no, I said this. Maybe I shouldn't, but it's good that I said it. Oh no, not another flip chart. One of the top civil service officers looked at me. You have brought in quite a number of people into this room who are, the word experts is also, who know what is going on the ground. Surely we don't need a flip chart to document points, right? So how do you relate, your relatability, your respect that these are folks on the ground? They may tell you things that you already know. You have developed all your answers, but they are still going to keep telling you stuff because they will give you suggestions. So I feel some of it will be repeat broadcasts, of course, but that door must remain more open than more narrow.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. So that's really, I think your your experience and wisdom really came out through that answer. And you mentioned that you've witnessed, it seems like sometimes the door is opening and then suddenly it gets narrower, right? I think this is the thing that we must be more cognizant of this. I think society must be more cognizant that change is not, it's not unidirectional, and it doesn't happen by chance. I mean, it takes a lot of effort, right? Democracy requires a lot of work, right? You cannot just expect, oh, people are more liberal, people are more they want more political openness, therefore it will happen. I mean, it's not as easy as that, right? And I think I really want to get back to the NMP later, but I just wanted to ask you on this, on the civil
Mm.
society. Where do you think we are at now? Do you think it's better today? Because on one hand, it's definitely better because you mentioned the online space where people are doing things where they don't have to be registered, under the ROS. And shout out to Lepak Conversations. I'm not sure whether you have followed them. Yeah, so they are pretty good. Just two young women doing it. Yeah, and I think there are many such spaces, right, online. But on the other, you see that there seems to be a tightening of space in other areas as well. So where do you think we are at now?
On a very good day of optimism, high optimism, yeah, on a good path. Then on a day when I read something and go and double check against the speech made, then I go, wow. So I do think that that level of fluctuation will be happening over and over again, right? So the recent discussion on the repeal of the 377A. It took a very long time, right? For something, and I'm the former president of Marwa and everything from 2007 till 2021. I've been on the EXCO, right? So now I'm a member. So when I talk about those years when I feel when we start slowly, and it's all evolution, even at the civil society level, that you are growing in your own experience. The more you listen, the more you read, different parts are coming into a pattern. So when one understands deeply what it means to the rights of a person, that we kept denying our LBGT community the repeal for so long, I do think is already quite disastrous in my view. And I do understand the sentiments of people who are strongly attuned to their faith, yeah? But at the same time, Singapore is secular. So if we follow secularism and we follow our pledge and we follow this, then it is a given. But it took a long time before even an unenforceable law by the state decided not to enforce it, that it took a long time for the repeal process to begin. But now we have another conundrum, the word that you used earlier. Now, amendment to the Constitution, Article 12. Now, Article 12 did not just come from the advocacy work on 377A. It also came from the women's side under CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of blah, 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 of all forms of discrimination against women. We found that regardless of race, language, and religion, there's no gender. So there needs to be an amendment on our constitution for that. But that means recognizing different types of gender identity and different forms of sexual orientation. So what are we doing? We are now going to amend the constitution to define marriage. It's almost like, if you asked me earlier, right, how does one feel? I feel, oh goodness, it's going back. So how are to define marriage now? What is the norm that we are setting for marriage?
But don't you think on this it's purely an electoral issue on the part of the government?
Okay, I'll come to that. So just give me a
sorry.
bit.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. It's all right. So on the redefining marriage, it will be that we are going to say what is the value the normative process to what we are going to recognize. So there will be a whole group of people who will not be recognized under a legal union. You can live in partnership, and as long as you're quiet about it. So again, there will be marginalization of the community. So is this then, and I think this is the next step that you have to fight for. How long will it take? I don't know. This could be an electoral, getting your ground secured for elections, of course, but it also will be often put to us that this is the best way of keeping everyone in Singapore, a tiny country like Singapore, at peace with one another. But I am saying then, what is the best way for all of us to really enwrap enwrap myself, for example, onto a peace platform? I know that your views are very different from mine, and yet I have to give you that space that you hold your views. You also have to give me. The peace bridge is always a dynamic one. It can also be nebulous, but by this state level approach of maintaining peace, it can be good in its own way. We don't rock the boat at all. But I also feel it's time for us to grow and up in a way and handle it. And if really tomorrow it's already happening on social media, I've read some of the stuff and I go, wow, once people start beating that drum, it just goes into no more rationalization stops. It becomes emotive words, it becomes bad language, etc. What are my coping skills? How do I not engage? I think these are all the important training programs we have to float on the ground. And therefore, schools become very important. I'm very happy the Minister of Education is saying, let's lessen the examination phenomena, etc. But I, like others that I have read, what then should be in our curriculum? If we are so digitized and I can access knowledge, more important is how I moderate on the knowledge. How do I find my fixed points of value systems as I work through? And we have gone to Finland a few times to learn from them. And I want to know, how are we putting it into place?
Right.
So there are many parts. So the frustration will be, and I understand the NMPs. I've read through all of the essays there. Many feel, oh, there's so much more that one can give. I agree totally. But it has to go to the elected politician. You put name up, I have to be convinced by you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for that. Just one comment. Just one comment. I think I completely agree. This I mean, social media and is pretty new, right, in human evolution, right? And unfortunately, much of our interaction with other people is on social media. And on social media, the norms are completely different, right? Half the things we say online to another person we are debating with, we would never say to that person in person, right? So I think what really needs to happen is more in-person debates, like where you see each other, where people will, even if you hold completely opposing views, right, you are just nicer to each other, right? There's just really you give that person like at least some human dignity when you're debating in person. But when it's faceless online, right, anything goes. So I really think, even though I myself do engage in a lot of online debate, unfortunately, unnecessarily so also a lot of times, I really think that we should have more, or even like this, right, where we can see each other, and even if we disagree, I know, we will at least still be cordial to each other. So I definitely agree with you. I am also, I don't know whether you are, but it sounds like you're a little. I'm a tech skeptic. So I don't think like embracing technology every single time, right, is a good thing, right? In classrooms, sometimes old school is still best, for instance. So yeah, so just based, and thank you for relating it back to the NMP, right? So wouldn't you think that even in a situation that you described in 2040, where hopefully the opposition matures, the government also politically matures, and Singapore society politically matures, even in such a situation, right, where you have maybe a strong PAP but also a strong opposition, whatever that opposition looks like, wouldn't you think there is space for unelected MPs who do not have to pander to the electorate on some issues, right? And these are the ones that they can fight for the people on the fringe, whatever that fringe is, because the fringe will also change as societal norms change. Whereas elected politicians, they would have to pander to the median voter, and NMPs or unelected officials do not have to. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
I, I would like to say, I don't know. I don't know. That's the truth, right? I feel if we, that word, I have a problem, right? Evolution, maturity, we are 57 years old, right? And the ruling party came in 1959.
59.
So that's 63 years, 63 years. I am in my 60s, and then I'm going, oh God, I am ready to like, hello, let me off, you know. And here we are. Are we still a young nation? There must definitely be our own levels of whether we want to be considered middle age. The 60s is the new 30s. Okay, I grant it. We are in now. But definitely the spaces have to be opened up. Our media has to play a bigger, larger role. I read
Agreed.
deep interest. I still subscribe to the Straits Times because I
Me
work.
too.
Yeah. And yet 2 days ago, there was a whole page on the conference that they are attending in Spain. And I read through the stories. Oh, it's gripping, it's invigorating, it gives you energy. We want that here. And those spaces have to open up. I find it, I'm not bean counting, so I stand corrected by anybody out there who's doing the bean counting. I'm under the top committee of privileges, right? I find that the space given to the opposition party has diminished somewhat. Even photographs have diminished. And I haven't done my bean counting, but I've noticed it. And if so, why? So you get their stuff when you engage on their Facebook and know, oh, that was asked, etc. So for us to get onto this platform, this level of engagement, our media needs to become evenly balanced. Social media is doing part of it. And coming back to your question then, social media is disruptive as well as it gives us information. I feel therefore the training of how we deal with information is important. And you said something very important. What you say to someone face to face, eye to eye, is very different from what you put on social media. I have been caught out, not in bad language. I have received some, of course, but I have made mistakes and people correct me and I apologize. But some of them, when they correct me, they take a swipe. I do not engage on the swipe until it gets very
Right.
then you have to engage on the swipe. So I feel, would you say that to me if we are talking face to face?
Exactly.
Our values, our decorum must come back to the forefront. Who can do that? Me, individually, teachers, society, civil society, media. We have to call out on that. But I feel this, to me, is the part that I worry most about us in Singapore, that we are loosening a lot. It's becoming not loosening, it's becoming loose. Our framing of our value systems and how we operate on it at the ground level. I think this is the part that worries me because we are highly congested, we are running all the time, and therefore what is the space I'm giving to another person? Do I give the space or I just want to climb over and get on with things? I'm talking even about social environments. I find this is the part, if we are not looking at our mobile phones all the time, but looking around at us and looking at people behavior, I do think it is of concern. It is of concern. Whether you're a motorist on the road, a pedestrian, a shopper in a shop, etc., I find that we are dealing with a lot of tensions, and that is why I think we have many explosions and implosions that take different forms of levels of aggression. So something we need to address. We are calling it all mental health. I don't know, because is it a well-being issue that we are talking about? People's well-being. So I don't know whether I have gone off the
No,
question.
no, 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 no. I think you're right. So I think the last part, what you said, I think those are existential questions, right? Because anyone who drives would know that Singaporean drivers are always impatient, including myself when I'm on the road. It's almost as if we are always rushing for something, and sometimes the kindness isn't there as well. And you were linking it back to there's something deeper there, right? Why do we behave like that? And the behaviors online we see, it's not exactly separate from all of those other unkind behaviors that we see in society, right? So no, you've given me definitely a lot of things to think about. So would you then say that this deep I don't know, cultural problem, what would you say, what is that, where did that come from? Is it uh
I
extreme meritocracy, or what is it?
oh, I really I know on this cause and effect thing, causes. I think it's multi causes, and I worry about this, whether our young people, there's a growing sense of a disbelief in the system. I think, and if so, why? And if so, what is triggering them? Like, I find there's quite an uh, looking at newspaper reports and social media, a bit of a higher incidence of aggression among our teenagers and all. Something is out of sync. Is it just family? Is it just school? Is it that we are not? I go back to what I kept raising as a reporter and in Parliament. What are our support structures within our social system? Have we put enough of a budget on it? Have we trained enough officers so that our proportion of people working with our different communities, whether it's children, young people, and our older folks, is higher? Are we having too few that are dealing with too many? I still remember my speech, and I now we are now how many years later? When I did it, I was shocked to find out that one social worker was handling about 300 cases per year. Divide by 12, that's a huge number of cases to work with, and have a time period. So highly stressful. What is the situation today? I think we are going through quite a number of stresses at the social level. Therefore, what are our resources that we are pumping in? What is the budget? What are our training approaches? We are running after people growing older that was surfaced long ago. I was a reporter in the mid 90s, and already surfaced at that time and a bit before my time. We are now 2022. Yes, we are engaging now. But why this huge time lag? Experts, I wasn't an expert. I was quoting experts, researchers. If experts have said it, then what was our timeline to dealing with it? So I think this is where I feel the citizens have to ask more, have to engage more. And if I will vote for you, you are accountable to me as a citizen. So whenever the media keeps running to NMPs, I'm not saying it's wrong, but then becomes the
Right.
that becomes the camouflage.
Understand.
I
Yeah,
have
and it's almost a drug also, right? Then you don't have to
yeah.
call you don't have to call the elected politicians to account as well. Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. Yeah.
And the elected MP must know, not give the reporter a hard time. You are expected to answer. And if HQ, meaning the ruling party, doesn't allow you to answer, our media must say, when contacted, the MP didn't
Right.
give. But we have dropped that line totally. No comment from the government body, no comment from an elected MP. We have dropped it. So I feel these are all the tools that we need to engage, and there are many stakeholders who have to play their part, and we have to assert and activate can keep asking these questions over and over again. Otherwise, 2040, this will continue. The NMP scheme will continue, and we will not have a robust enough parliamentary system. And I put there in my chapter that we have an XL-sized parliament.
Right.
Some of the elected MPs, I do not know all of them. And then
Yeah.
National Day, when I look at the box, that, that's
Right.
the team, that
Yeah.
you don't know,
Right. So I think to act on your advice, right, I just wanted to say that I have invited many PAP MPs to this show, but when contacted, they declined to come on. So yeah, but I mean, okay, I mean, I'm not the mainstream media, right? So there's nothing I can do. But I guess for people from the Straits Times, I mean, maybe they also underestimate the power that they have, right? People from the mainstream media, these media outlets, they yes, for sure there's a power imbalance. There will always be when you're dealing with the state, right? But don't underestimate, I suppose, the power they have also. I mean, they shouldn't underestimate the power they have. And also, I just wanted to say I thought the media has been moving in the right direction with regard to opposition coverage, especially in 2020, the election. But you're completely right. The COP, I mean, you saw I was very disappointed in the coverage. So I actually had a couple more things, but we only have about 4 or 5 minutes, right? So just briefly, right? The GRC, right? So you are against it, right? I think even as part of your work in Marwa, you have talked about the electoral system quite a bit, and but if racism still exists, right, and there's racial stereotypes, all of this still exists, right? Why wouldn't the GRC be a safeguard against racial voting?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because I have to know my answer, which I don't. How far have we come in our social cohesiveness? We talk about racial harmony day. We talk about we are all together, one united people, etc. But I have written that chapter in Rico Baksong's book,
Yes.
on racism, and I'm pulling out some stuff from there. I feel that how we address issues of racism has to come under very clearly, you are a person, I'm a person, you're a citizen, I'm a citizen, you're a foreigner, but you're still a person. Therefore, that dignity issue, the rights issue has to be at the forefront. So what are we doing in our early childhood classes? What are we doing in our kindergarten? What are we doing in the primary schools? All the way that track must be there. And have we overplaced it with or displaced it even with the Racial Harmony Day? Even back then in Parliament, I think I did ask this question about Racial Harmony Day and what forms, and I did my homework by looking at the scene. And yet I was told, a lot happens on Racial Harmony Day by the then Education Minister. I already know, and I itemized it. But today I hear that schools are doing more research-based stuff, etc. But after that, what do we do with it? How are we talking about discrimination? We are going to have an Anti-Discrimination Act. Is it still going to be under TAF Act? It shouldn't be, because discrimination takes place across society, not only at the workplace. So I think these are the tenets for the next level of our engagement as a citizen. Now, coming back to your question, I think this is a fundamental bedrock. When I was in school, I have been so blessed, both home and school in tandem. This was my bedrock. Then complemented that with the books I read. Today, is that our bedrock? I want to know through education, through the media, through ministries' responses, are we having that bedrock? And that is crucial to me in the early formative years of a child. Second part, yesterday's newspaper showed us our population figures. Right? We are 3.5 million citizens,
Right.
but we have a whole lot of different people in our society. That is diversity. To what extent are we also bringing that into the discussion outside of the politics of you taking my job, which is quite nonsensical at one level, because none of us want to go and be a cleaner at the HDB block because the wages are too low. I think that's another separate issue, but I'm separate but important issue. What I'm saying is we have to also take this, what is our combination of people in our country and how responding to each other. I think that's quite crucial. Now, the last part that you asked, politically, will we survive? Will it become an all Chinese parliament? Then I would ask this political party, you mean you cannot find an Indian, a Malay, a European, an American who's a citizen, a Malaysian who's now a Singapore citizen? You can't? What is your scanning? How are you finding your candidates? I will ask of all political parties. Lastly, citizen. When you vote, are you seeing, oh, that person is not the same color skin as me? It applies to both, minority, oh, that one I do not want, he's the
For sure.
majority. I think this is going to be our test. We did it in our early years. It is our test. We have to put ourselves to the test. I believe the Singaporean will rise above it. I
Right.
believe so. Yeah.
So thank you. And I think you're right. I mean, if without the GRC, then the parties cannot fill minority candidates who can win, right? Then it's really an indictment of the parties, right? So that part I definitely agree. The faith in Singaporeans, I am agnostic about that.
On a bit haywire if you are just 1 minute. I feel the over importance that we have placed on the mother tongue, that has become our derailment. I mean, I've been in environments, I'm paying for a course that I love. I really love it. It's a recreational course I am on. Somewhere along the line, I will find that my dear Chinese friends will start talking to each other in Mandarin. Then I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, now when am I going to start telling them, I miss your jokes? Why don't you speak English when you can speak English? I haven't reached because I'm waiting, and I will say it. It's up to me to say it because you have gone, you have a cloud cover over you.
Yeah.
You think it's acceptable. I'm sorry, it is not acceptable. So the state, this goes back to my very first bit that I opened with, the state has to be the arbiter. The former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, strict, disciplinarian, harsh, some of the things I just go and I scratch my head, right? But arbiter, this is not acceptable. But yet he was also the person who introduced the mother tongue approach and really entrenched it, right? He believed.
So you think the mother tongue policy, the bilingual policy has done us harm? Has done multiracialism harm, you think?
It is like discussing race and faith, right? Sometimes it's so hard to separate the two, but yet they are separate. So race and mother tongue can be separate, but if you fuse it, then it becomes, how do you want to operate on diversity and inclusion? It can become, you see? So our sensitization to how we use our languages. I could be a great Tamil speaker, but if I just, with other people in the group, I start talking only in Tamil, then I'm telling all of you, you're not important to this conversation. Our sensitivity is important. And what do we have? We have inherited, whether we want to keep harping about colonization or whatever, we have inherited the neutral language of English. It's neutrality. Neutrality is good. It keeps us cohesive. It keeps us being united as a community of people. So I think this is where we need to bring it back to some middle ground. And we have to do all that under that bedrock that I talked about, etiquette, politeness, being sensitive to other people's needs, etc. Yeah.
So Braema, the anecdote you just shared, wouldn't that be a case, an evidence in favor of having the GRC rather than abolishing?
Yeah.
Because
But
society is still like that, and
yeah,
you see people will retreat to, even if it's not racial, there is this
yeah,
linguistic sometimes
yeah.
connection that people have. So wouldn't you say that that is actually making a case for the GRC?
It's making a case for us to know more than one language or two languages. I know quite a number of Indians who are very good in their Mandarin. I know right, one Malay person who is good at Mandarin. But I'm not saying therefore the bilingualism has to. I'm saying there are two parts. There's a cultural language that you need for your own identity. But what then is
Right.
our culture with our intermarriages and everything? It's lovely. I love the mix up that we are living in. It's beautiful. So then comes our cultural language to say this is your identity marker. One part. Have we talked about it enough? Second part, the language of economy. If I am aiming that I really want my businesses to be in Germany, I want to pick up German, or I want to pick up Mandarin, I want to pick up Vietnamese or whatever, right? So who then is the candidate? Going back to that question that you asked. If the candidate with a body language, his or her body language, with her compassion, his compassion, with being engaged with me, and on the podium during rallies and all that can speak in good English. Remember JBJ, he could only speak English. And if we can have a candidate who can also speak English plus one of the more commonly used language, then what is the problem? What is
Right.
the this overemphasis becomes erasure. You don't have it. Yeah, oh, you can't speak Mandarin, cancel. Then the problem also lies with us. Our indicators of who we want, what we want. Last part to that, I'm not last part
Okay,
is
carry on, carry on. Yeah.
the Meet the People session. The Meet the People session was started by David Marshall. And he started it when I read the book by Kevin Tan, Dr. Kevin Tan. When I read the book, very clear the parameters and the rationale for starting it. We do not know what's happening at the ground. So I need to go and find out. We need to meet the people. Today, I'm not so sure what is the structuring of our Meet the People session. Off the cuff, and here and there, I hear, oh, they have to really answer to everybody's inconvenience. Anything becomes an inconvenient, you have to write the letter to the different ministries. So, citizen, what is the crucial need that you need to see an MP? So, all that comes under what are we structuring for our people? It becomes demand and supply. Who said this? I don't know. So when people ask me, why don't I become a politician? I say, I will lose. I don't have patience for this. If you have a brain full of cockroaches, you're not coming to see the MP to ask about it, right? It has
Absolutely.
tougher and sterner issues that are more legislative. So that
Yeah.
is the bicameral system. I said our elected MP has to move more into that legislative frame. And you can have council, you can have second layer to run town councils and support structures. Okay, but that's another deeper, I put it in
No,
chapter. Yeah.
no, I agree. I think the MPS also serves to elevate the MP status as if as a patron, right? Oh, I'm the one who can solve this particular problem. And even though most of the time the request probably gets rejected anyway, right? But they still say, oh, my MP is doing something for me. But also, if the help is on a case by case basis, and it's not at a policy level, there's also something wrong. So the person who doesn't see the MP doesn't get the help then, or similar circumstances. So how does it work, right? But anyway, so I agree with that criticism. But I would say that most bicameral legislatures, right? Not the US maybe, but many
Yeah.
bicameral legislatures, they have unelected members of parliament as well.
Yeah. So
Uh,
stability, going back to your earlier question.
yeah,
So if this so-called independent task force and consultations, maybe that's one way. So we have a smaller team. I'm not saying that should be the way, this is just my view, smaller team, elected MPs, and the council level, etc., people who are engaged with the people in meeting their needs, whether it's cockroaches or whatever. They're all important. But I think how an MP's role has to be also got to be maybe looked at, reviewed.
I completely agree. I mentioned this in the episode with Anthea as well. We have, I think, diminished the actual role of an MP, which is to represent the constituents in Parliament, right? The parliamentary role, right, is almost not emphasized. It's undermined, I think, in some cases. And people ask, what can your MP really do for you, like in terms of mosquitoes and walkways, when all of these things government agencies can do them. You don't need elected representatives to do that. I think it's a waste of talent. I mean, it says so in the job description, right? Member of Parliament. You're supposed to be in Parliament and representing people and talking about the bigger picture issues. But I think it's a redefining of the role of an MP that Singaporeans have also bought into, I think. And when we continue to seek, like, when anything goes wrong, ask the MP, right? Ask the MP, right? I think we are also playing into the system.
And not only ask the MP, sorry, if the mosquito problem is not solved, I do think you got to see. But MP has become a little, what's the right word? We have made it larger. Every opening, please, guest of honor, etc., etc. Need an event.
Yeah.
So it is all a little bit of a mishmash in a way, and that's why I think the mainstream media needs to become have deeper insights.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think many years ago, Professor Hussein Mutarir actually wrote a letter to Straits Times. It was published, and he was even suggesting that he doesn't understand why when MPs come into an event, people have to stand up. He says there's no reason. Like, he was basically making a similar argument to you, like, as in we don't need to raise the level of
I totally agree with that. I find that if I don't stand up, I'm going to be the only one sitting.
Same.
Like, up.
Yeah. I feel peer pressure also too.
Protocols have gone a bit haywire.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much. We exceeded the time, but it was such a lovely conversation. You're clearly a very wise person, and I learned a lot from. No, really. And I learned a lot from this conversation.
By the way.
Okay, thank you so much, Braema. I really appreciate it. And good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.